Run for your life. Don't look back. Head for the hills. With the cities on the plain already beginning to smolder, an angel pushes Lot and his wife to run for higher ground, to avoid being swept up in God's total destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. As the ground under her feet began to rise, offering the prospect of safety and a better view, Lot's wife simply couldn't resist. She turned back one last time and was turned into a pillar of salt, destined to gaze upon the destruction for eternity, forever poised between devastation and salvation. As Rabbi Marcy Bellows asks, is Lot's wife, the woman and the salty sculpture that remains of her, a warning or a monument? Deuteronomy casts her and the arid landscape she inhabits as a cautionary tale against disobedience and disloyalty. Future generations will see the barrenness of the land, sulfur, salt, and nothing else, and remember that she, along with others, did not obey God. Her backward glance represents a lack of conviction. She was more taken with destruction than safety. Why couldn't she keep the faith and keep running? The Midrash Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer sees beyond the salty crust of Lot's wife to the person underneath. She turned back not out of a lack of faith, but out of love. It was there on that plain where she lived, laughed, and wept. It was there she birthed and raised her daughters. And it was there that on that day when she left the only life she knew, her 2 married daughters remained. In her backward glance, she hoped to see them. Instead, she witnessed them swept up in sulfurous smoke, and her heart became as desolate as the plain. Perhaps she turned to salt from her tears. That same Midrash says that as she turned, in that moment of overwhelming grief and regret, she glimpsed the back of the Shekhinah. Even as divine judgment was sweeping away her family and her home, Lot's wife regarded the hovering, intimate, consoling presence of God. That was why she turned into a pillar. She simply could not survive direct contact with the divine. But she wasn't destroyed like everything else on the plain. Instead, she remained a salt, a witness to the presence of the Shekhinah. I would have looked back too. I think most of us would. We were reading this story well after 11 a.m., but on the 11th day of the 11th month, the day in 1918 when the armistice ended the Great War, and the world slowly, uncertainly began to tilt away from destruction. That war left unimaginable death and devastation in its wake. Given the chance to flee the battlefield, wouldn't we have thought about those we left dying in the mud and turned around just for the quickest of glances? Might our tears have covered us in salt? We aren't fleeing the cities of the plain, and we aren't direct witnesses to the ravages of a global war. The story of Lot's wife, however, especially read on this day when the whole world turns and looks back, reminds us that we perpetually exist in an uncertain balance between destruction and salvation, hoping for a glimpse of the divine as we make our way. Of all the people in this parasha, even Avraham Avinu, even Abraham our father, Lot's wife alone remains with us. Cragged and worn, she still rests atop Mount Sodom, looking out towards the barren land of the Dead Sea, unmoving in the face of unrelenting sun and wind. Her steadfast presence is a monument to the precarious nature of our lives, to our need to look backwards now and again, and to the accompanying presence of God, even in the worst moments.